detecting a massive object emerging from hyperspace.
I don't like having to be the person to say this, and I definitely am guilty of everything that I'm about to spell out in this video, but we as a Star Wars community have a problem with misplaced blame whenever it comes to any Star Wars property that has come out since 2013, and especially we have a problem with misplaced praise, and specifically where any of the fault is put on or whose shoulders it's put on. And I've seen that frequently, especially now, just in these last few years, anything that is bad is always placed on Disney's shoulders, whereas anything that is particularly good, that perhaps we as a fandom enjoy, is always placed on the individual creator who's the head of the project. You see, when The Mandalorian is excellent and all the fans love it, well, everyone says, well, Jon Favreau, of course, thank you for everything that you've done. When Star Wars The Clone Wars has an amazing finale and becomes a #1 stream show of all time, everyone says, well, Dave Filoni, you fantastic bastard, you. How have you done such an amazing job as this? And honestly, I completely agree with both of these statements. But whenever something is received less favorably in the Star Wars community, we always blame Disney. That's where the fault always tends to go to. The Last Jedi, maybe even Star Wars Rebels, Star Wars Resistance, anything, any decision in the actual universe or behind the scenes that we disagree with or we dislike is always placed on Disney's shoulders. And honestly, while there is few examples of this actually being the case, and I think it's a fair assessment to put the blame on Disney, there are more than enough examples, more so than I say there would be in this case, that actually show that it is not specifically Disney's fault. So firstly, if there is any fault at all with the current state of Star Wars, it needs to not be put on Disney's shoulders, but rather Lucasfilm's shoulders. See, the thing is that Disney is a parent company. Disney owns Lucasfilm. Disney's only job and only responsibility that it gives to Lucasfilm is to give them money and Lucasfilm to give them back more money. The same is true for Pixar, Marvel Studios, ESPN, National Geographic, and any of the other properties that Disney owns. Its sole purpose and direction is simply to provide a profit from its subsequent smaller companies back to the larger corporation. So most of these decisions, most of these things that we dislike isn't coming from Disney, it's actually coming from Lucasfilm itself. So if you want to blame Lucasfilm, that's completely fair. However, blaming Disney itself doesn't quite make sense. It would be like if a child committed a crime and then the police came to the house and arrested the parents instead, when in fact they didn't even know what the child was doing at the time. But ultimately, when people say that they hate Disney Star Wars, it's really just coming from the general audience. And when you say you hate Disney Star Wars, you don't really hate Disney Star Wars, the massive, all the shows that they've made, the video games, the new grounds in the comics and novels that they've made. You'd hate the sequel trilogy. And believe me, I'm in the same boat. I do not like the sequel trilogy. I am a big fan of the original and the prequel trilogy. That is just how I am, you know? And I think that in time, people are going to start liking the sequel trilogy. But as for right now, I personally don't. And that is what everyone tends to dislike. That is what everyone hates. When everyone says that Disney has ruined Star Wars, they're not talking about Rogue One. They're not talking about all the Marvel comics, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, Jedi Fallen Order, any of the novels that they've come out with. They are specifically talking about the 3 latest Skywalker Saga movies, episodes 7, 8, and 9. And when these episodes do poorly, who do they blame? Often Kathleen Kennedy, I'll admit, but every time it's always, oh, Star Wars is being ruined by Disney Corporation. However, when Rogue One did super well, nobody praised Disney. Because why would you praise Disney? Everyone praised Gareth Edwards. Everyone praised the people that were involved, the actors. When Star Wars The Clone Wars did poorly in episodes 5 through 8, in Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 7, who did they blame? We blame Disney because God forbid that Dave Filoni could make a few bad episodes. No, they had to blame Disney. But then, of course, in episodes 9 through 12, everyone's like, Dave Filoni, you're absolutely perfect. You're amazing. How could you ever, we would never leave you. Everyone is praising him left and right, as I believe they should. But if we're praising him for the good, then we have to fault him for the bad. And I see so many people, their big thing against Disney is they destroyed the Legends, the expanded universe. Guys, the expanded universe was destroyed by George Lucas. Let's get that through everyone's head. Everyone says, oh, how could Disney erase the old canon and make it Legends, brand it, so to speak, basically making it a taboo like stepchild that we just don't talk to. The Legends was routinely being overwritten, redone, retconned, and tossed to the side long before Disney bought the rights to Lucasfilm. For those of you who don't remember, don't know, or perhaps don't even care to look up, there was another show before Star Wars The Clone Wars premiered in 2008. It was called Star Wars Clone Wars. Aside from that, there was video games, Star Wars The Clone Wars. There was multiple games like Star Wars Bounty Hunter, Republic Commandos, all the Battlefront games. It all came out before Star Wars The Clone Wars. There was a bunch of comics, books, everything, you name it. It was out there. And George Lucas came in with officially licensed Lucasfilm material and overwrote all of that with the 3D animated cartoon Star Wars The Clone Wars. It completely changed everything from characters' deaths, character motivations, personalities, everything. Wrote in Ahsoka. This is something that he did, George Lucas and Dave Filoni, the man who we praise as godsend from George Lucas himself, the second coming of George Lucas and the future president of Lucasfilm. This is something that they did together. So overwriting old, unorganized canon, as it is now known, Legends, or as we like to call it, who have been in the fandom for a long time, the expanded universe, this is something that's been done for a long time. It's not necessarily something that is new that Disney did, and we should stop villainizing Disney for starters. We need to stop actually saying that they were wrong for erasing all that. If you bought a company and your whole goal was to make money in movies and to work your way through the absolute quagmire that is the Legends, the expanded universe of Star Wars, in order to try and form a coherent story that doesn't in the slightest way contradict any of the other material, you are in for a long haul. Quite frankly, it's nearly impossible. And I, for one, am actually a very big fan of the canon that they have created in such a short time from their initial buying of the property in 2013 till now, 7 years later in 2020. But perhaps this isn't one of your gripes with Disney and Star Wars. Perhaps your gripe is how they handle directors, creative freedom. While it is true that there's a limited amount of creative freedom when it comes to the Star Wars property nowadays, they, after all, do have to fit it into their new canon. The same problems that, again, were faced previously with trying to make a story within the Legends canon work wouldn't have worked out. The same is true now. Most stories can't exist because it has to fit into a certain narrative. Just like how originally, just a crazy strange example that I know, in Solo, when Darth Maul is about to pull out his lightsaber, the creators of the movie actually wanted his original lightsaber from episode 1, but Sam Witwer, the guy who voices him, said, well, actually he wouldn't have that lightsaber at this point, so you have to change that up. See, there's certain concessions that need to be made in certain elements if you want to maintain the canon and coherent story that is placed throughout the Star Wars timeline. So when directors like Phil Lord and a bunch of the other directors who were in Solo, they had to reshoot the movie entirely. Obviously, we have Colin Trevorrow and how his vision of Star Wars didn't exactly fit with what Disney was working with, and how exactly Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm really ultimately wanted the direction of the series to go. That needed to be let go. And this isn't a decision that came from Bob Iger. Bob Iger actually stopped the movies altogether because they simply weren't doing well and were damaging to the property. The decisions to fire the directors came from Kathleen Kennedy. All right, D&D, after their absolutely botched and terrible attempt at making a final season for Game of Thrones, were let off not by Lucasfilm, or not by Disney, but by Lucasfilm. So most of these decisions don't really come from Bob Iger. Bob Iger is the guy who steps in only when absolutely necessary. And for even further proof, we just need to look at the other properties that Disney owns, like Marvel Studios. Kevin Feige, for example, is absolutely running Marvel Studios. You think Bob Iger steps in and because you think he really knows a thing about Marvel properties? The same can be said with Pixar animation. The same can be said for ESPN. You think Bob Iger's going in there and be like, what if we change the rules of football? No, he made a system, or he didn't make the system, but he bought the system, and he's letting it do its own thing. Because he knows if he just sits back and let people who actually know what they're doing do what they know they're doing, then he is going to end up making money. So guys, again, ultimately, you do not dislike Disney Star Wars. You dislike the sequel trilogy. You do not dislike Disney Star Wars, you dislike Lucasfilm, you dislike Kathleen Kennedy, you don't like some of the decisions you're made, but if you actually take a step back. Just take a minute, take a step back, and analyze all the Star Wars that we have gotten in the years from 2013 to 2020. Clone Wars, Jedi Fallen Order, 2 Battlefront games, a bunch of novels and comics that are absolutely amazing if you ever have the time to read. You're really only getting half of the Star Wars story if you don't delve into these pieces of literature. Then ultimately, when you take a look at all of Disney's Star Wars, quote-unquote, you're actually going to be very satisfied with what you're looking at. But Star Wars 1980, they canceled Star Wars The Clone Wars only to bring it back later so they could try and make themselves look good. That was ultimately an ownership problem with Cartoon Network, which is why they brought Dave Filoni back right away to make Star Wars Rebels. Was Star Wars Rebels as good? No. Was Star Wars Resistance good? No. Who did they blame for that? Everyone blamed Disney, despite the fact that Dave Filoni was the one who was actually working on the show. The same guy who worked on Star Wars The Clone Wars worked on Star Wars Resistance and Star Wars Rebels. If it is anyone's fault, it is the individual creators and the fault of Lucasfilm. But we as a fandom have failed to actually recognize that Lucasfilm could ever be at any fault whatsoever. Everyone always goes to Disney for the blame. When it comes to Episode 9, they blame Disney. It's Disney's interaction that ruined this trilogy. It wasn't really J.J. Abrams. He had complete creative freedom. It wasn't, any of the creators that worked alongside him. It was all Disney. This is something that I saw way in the beginning in 2014 when Rebels premiered, and it's something that I'm seeing increasingly going forward. Is every time I talk to friends and every time I look online, everyone's just like, Disney is ruining Star Wars. And ultimately, everybody, they are not. Disney is taking a back seat when it comes to Star Wars. Yes, Bob Iger put a halt on the anthology movies, the Star Wars story movies, because they weren't doing well. And ultimately, his job is to make money. So if the whole goal is to make something that's going to make money. And in order to make money, we, the audience, the consumer, need to actually want to go see it. So, again, I know this is a bit of a tirade, I know it was a bit of a rant, and again, I'm guilty of all the same things. I can't tell you how many times I've said, Disney ruined something here, but ultimately it is not Disney's fault. Just the same as whenever Marvel comes out with a bad movie, nobody ever says, it's Disney's fault. No, it's Marvel's fault. When Lucasfilm and Star Wars come out with a bad movie, it's not Disney's fault, it's Star Wars' fault. So let's take a step back, realize who we actually need to be blaming, who we need to actually be going towards, who we need to be criticizing, and it's not Disney, it's ultimately Lucasfilm. Thanks for watching, guys. Again, sorry for that tirade, but it's just something that I really think needs to be said from time to time. People need to have a reminder of who's at fault, who's at blame, and who needs to be praised when things are good or bad. Thanks for watching. Give me your thoughts below. What do you guys think of this entire situation? Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you again next time.